Welcome back to Art Practice ASMR. In this video, I'm talking about my top 10 favorite anime from the past decade. And the way I'm breaking down this list is by going through each year and talking about my personal favorite from that year. So starting this list off, I'm going with 2010, and my favorite anime of that year was Angel Beats. Angel Beats is a really interesting anime on many different levels. For one, it is an anime that completely understands the range of emotions that it wants to express. In any given episode, it could range from laugh out loud funny to soul-crushingly, heartbreakingly sad. And that's all contained within the 22-ish minute episodes. So it's a show that knows exactly how to weaponize your feelings. The other very interesting thing that I need to praise about this show is just the entire premise. Angel Beats is an interesting anime because all of the main characters are dead. And they all died off screen before the show even starts. The first episode starts when the main character wakes up in the afterlife. And believe it or not, the afterlife is a high school. So all of these main characters are all students who attend this high school in the afterlife. But there is nothing normal about this abnormal situation, because these students who have died don't want to follow the rules. In fact, they do everything they can to break the rules. These students have created an army dedicated to just disrupting the daily lives of the people attending the school. They will go out guns blazing, quite literally so, to just wage war on this whole sense of normalcy. Why are they doing this? It's because if you follow the rules of the school, you will disappear from this world. And that is something that all of these students are afraid of doing. They don't want to disappear. They're just afraid of what comes next. And I thought that was a very interesting and profound concept, coming from a show that at first glance seems like it could be something generic. But this show is anything but generic. It's something that sticks with you after you finish watching. I honestly feel that the words I've said here aren't even enough to do the justice of what I truly thought about this show. But I can't go into spoilers because this is a recommendation video, and that's not really a good thing to do. So hopefully that summary was enough for you guys, because now I think I'd like to talk about the background of this show. I'm drawing a blank on the series creator's name, but he's someone who has worked in a long career of visual novels. He worked on novels such as Clanad, Air, I think, several different visual novels and anime adaptations of them that have garnered a lot of positive reputation over the years. And he has this very distinct style from the other shows I've seen of his. I think his name's like Jun Maeda or something, but I'm probably wrong about that. Anyway, the other show that he's made is a show called Charlotte, and if you've seen it, you'll know how he uses that emotional response in his work, even though I personally didn't like Charlotte that much. Honestly, there is a lot I could say about this show, but I am coming up on the second anime that I've recommended, so I'd just like to say this show is definitely worth your time, and I highly recommend it. Now, moving on to 2011, this anime is one you may have heard of. It is called Fate Zero. Fate Zero is actually a prequel to an anime and visual novel called Fate Stay Night. Fate Zero was written by Gen Urobuchi, who you may know as the creator of Madoka Magica. Fate Zero is all about the Holy Grail War that took place before the events of Fate Stay Night. The Holy Grail War is basically a battle royale between different mages from different prominent houses of magic users. The way these mages compete in the Holy Grail War is they summon a legendary hero spirit, and they have the spirit fight for them as their avatar for the war. And it may sound kind of convoluted, but it's actually very easy to understand. Fate Zero is just one part of a bigger universe called like the Nasuverse or the Type Moon universe. These are all different properties made by the visual novel company Type Moon. But when I first watched Fate Zero, I actually had no knowledge of any of this stuff, and I still found it very easy to enjoy and easy to understand. I will recommend that you watch Fate Stay Night, the original 2007 version, before watching Fate Zero, but that's just my personal preference. There are a lot of references in this show that you may not understand if you have no previous knowledge. Anyway, Fate Zero is animated by the studio Ufotable, and if you're familiar with their previous work, you know that this show will be absolutely stunning and filled with brilliant fight animation and choreography. So this is another anime that I actually really highly recommend. To be honest, every anime on this list is one that I highly recommend. Speaking of high recommendations, this anime is pretty out there. It's a show called A Monogatari. This anime is called A Monogatari, and it is actually the sequel to a show called Monogatari. If you watch the Monogatari series through release order, Nisei Monogatari would be the second show in the order. However, if you went chronologically, it would be like the fifth show, and you would have a bunch of movies that came out in 2017 to watch much sooner before you get to this show, which came out in 2012. So what I'm trying to say is, if you're going to watch the Monogatari series, I recommend watching them through release order, and if you feel like rewatching them, that would be the time that you watch them through chronological order. But I'm kind of getting ahead of myself. I haven't even told you what the show is about. And I've actually found the perfect analogy for the show. If you have seen a show that came out last year called Rascal Does Not Dream of Bunny Girl Senpai, Monogatari is basically that show, but instead of science and emotions, the Monogatari series is about the supernatural. The main character is Koyomi Araragi. He is a half vampire, and he has a very unique life where people who come into his life keep having weird things happen to them. His girlfriend had a serious crab problem that could only be solved through the help of an exorcist. His little sister's best friend had a problem with snakes in her hair, and it got very hairy. I'm trying to think of puns for this because I already did that. Anyway, this show is all about the main character collecting a harem, but it's done very artfully and tastefully. Even certain incestuous scenes are done with a certain artful grace that I didn't think could be possible, but they apparently were. Anyway, I don't think I've really sold you on this show, and to be honest, A Monogatari, or just the whole series in general, isn't really a show that I find it easy to recommend. So if you've seen other anime by Studio Shaft, such as Madoka Magica, and you know how beautiful that show was, I would say give this show a watch, because no matter what you think of it, you can't deny that it is beautiful. If you liked that other Rascal anime I told you about, then give the Monogatari series a watch. Anyway, I've already moved on to a different anime. This is my pick from 2013, and it is an anime that you might know. It's called Killa Kill. I said that you might know Killa Kill kind of tongue-in-cheek, because Killa Kill was absolutely huge when it came out. I don't really have enough time in this video to describe what the state of the anime industry was at the time, but when Killa Kill came out, it was known as the anime that would save the anime industry. And I guess it did. If anything, Killa Kill really solidified the popularity of the Studio Trigger. I'm not certain, but I think Killa Kill may have been their first animation alone, as most Studio Trigger employees had worked for Gainax previously. Anyway, Killa Kill is a crazy anime about a girl trying to take revenge for her dead father. There's a ton of fan service in the show, and I don't really know how to recommend this show plot-wise. If you love beautiful Sakuga animation, this show is filled with it. It seamlessly blends 3D and 2D animation in ways that you will never expect. And I'm not entirely certain, but one of the aspects of this show saving anime, I think, had to do with the supposed fact that they had used cell animation for the first 10 episodes of Killa Kill. I really don't have anything to back this up other than me remembering this from 2013, so take that fact with a grain of salt. Anyway, even though I don't have very much time in this video to recommend things, I think I've made my case for this show. It's hilarious, it's dramatic, it has anything you could want from a Studio Trigger show if you've seen any of their other work. So yeah, give it a watch if you haven't already, but I'm sure you have. It also has a video game adaptation that came out this year, which I thought was kind of late to do so, but whatever. Anyway, here is my pick from 2014. which is an anime called Parasite, the Maxim. So Parasite is an anime that came out in the past decade, but it adapts a story that was written much, much earlier. I mean, not much, much earlier. I think it was just the 90s, but still, it kind of seemed very late to adapt something like this. Unlike adaptations like JoJo, Parasite actually takes its adaptation and brings it into the modern era. Being made in the 90s, the Parasite manga didn't have much modern technology. PCs had fairly recently become a household appliance, and so I'm sure they had that in the manga. But the anime brings things like laptops, cell phones, touch screens, all that crazy stuff, and it really elevates the story in very interesting ways. Speaking of the story, I haven't even told you what this show is about. Parasite is an alien invasion story. One night, a meteor or meteoric object flies really close to the Earth, and it releases spores onto the planet. These spores land on people's skins, and the spores burrow into their hosts and take over their bodies. Luckily for the main character of this show, he caught the spore burrowing into his arm, and so he cut off the circulation with his headphones, thus trapping the spore in his hand. The main character wakes up the next day to find out that his hand has become possessed by an alien entity. The alien begins researching all about humanity. It begins exhibiting its shape-shifting powers, and it introduces itself as Migi, or left hand, I think. I don't speak Japanese. It may be right hand, but I have no clue. Anyway, besides the point, this anime is one that I found very complex. It's a seinen anime, and I'm not sure I'm saying that right, which is like shonen but for adults. It's a show that has a lot of crazy battles, but it also has a lot of dark themes about life, which is a very broad topic, but this show expresses it in various different ways. This show can be a coming-of-age story about the different characters going through high school and college. It has aspects of romance, but it also has very interesting aspects, such as the aliens exploring what it's like to be human. The thing about these aliens is that they are generally emotionless killing machines. Their whole point of existing is to feed on whatever planet they invade, hence the whole parasite aspect. But some of these parasites learn, in a very broad sense, what it means to be human. There are characters who are parasites that have children with their human bodies, and they kind of learn to value what it means to create life. It's a show that might not seem like it's going to get deep at first, especially with crude humor and dick jokes at the beginning, but it eventually does become something very profound. It does get stupid at times, like the whole fight scenes are basically a hand fighting against other people's appendages, so it does get crazy. and having come out in 2014, there is a ton of dubstep in the soundtrack, and I remember at the time absolutely loving it, but I'm not sure it aged well. This next show is one that I think has absolutely aged well. This show is Oregairu 2, or in English it is known as My Youth Romantic Comedy Is Wrong as I Expected 2. Oregairu is an anime that made a huge splash in the anime community when it came out. This show is a romantic comedy and a harem, and some of the characters fit neatly into pre-existing archetypes. However, this show is not one that you have seen anything like it before. And a lot of that is thanks to how it deals with its characters. This is a show that can get very, very real. It treats its characters like they're actual people, and in fact, when you watch this show, you will definitely point out characters and think, hey, that's me, or hey, I knew someone like that. One of these characters who seems to get that a lot is the main character, Hikigaya Hachiman, which is the character I'm drawing right now. Hachiman is a introvert, but not in the shy kind of way. He's very blunt, he pushes people away, he absolutely suffers from the hedgehog's dilemma, and a lot of people were able to latch onto that. This show is all about him joining a newly formed club in his school. He's basically forced to join this club with another introverted woman who suffers in the same ways that he does. They end up getting a third member to their club who is very extroverted, but she's actually quite shy. Anyway, over time, a love triangle develops, and it is very funny, heartwarming, sad. It's a whole range of emotions that I absolutely felt at times. It's a show that can hit you hard, and luckily it's coming out with a third season pretty soon. Anyway, enough of that. Let's move on to the show from 2016, which is Mob Psycho 100. Being a fairly recent show with a fairly popular author, I'm sure you've already heard of Mob Psycho 100. It's all about this boy with immense psychic powers, except he doesn't really want to utilize them. And this is the first very interesting thing about the show. It's a typical shonen anime that completely busts stereotypes about shonen anime. The main character has this immense power, and he can one-hit KO anyone, but he doesn't value his psychic abilities. He knows that he has them, and he knows that if he uses them, his life could be much easier, but he also knows that he needs to exercise and have physical strength. He knows that he needs a good diet, and he needs to be healthy. And so instead of joining his paranormal club to go on crazy paranormal hijinks, he joins the weights club and he starts building muscle. This show isn't particularly about that whole aspect, though. It does have a villain of the week kind of thing about it, where different situations happen, and the main character has to go out with this phony exorcist named Reagan, who is a con artist, yet the most wholesome character in the show, and they basically perform exorcisms. It's crazy. Anyway, speaking of crazy, let's move on to this other anime called Maiden Abyss. Maiden Abyss is a complicated show for me to talk about right now. So I am going to quickly give a no spoilers version, and then I will give a spoilers version. And don't worry, I will put a warning at the bottom of the screen so you can mute if you feel so inclined. So, no spoilers. Maiden Abyss is the cutest anime you will ever see. It is just so heartwarming to watch these moe little children run around and go on happy adventures. This show is all about a little girl who wants to be like her adventurer mother, who has traveled deep into the abyss, which is this giant hole in the middle of their city. Anyway, she goes on adventures with her robot friend Reg. They meet a cute bunny girl. It's all sorts of fun, and I think you'll absolutely love it. I personally gave this show a 10 out of 10, and it was just something I genuinely enjoyed. So, I totally recommend that you watch this. This is another highly recommended show. Now on to the spoilers kind of thing. Don't worry, I'm not actually going to spoil any major plot points, but for the spoilers portion of this, I just want to say that for the most part, everything I just said was bullshit. This show is very cutesy, but it's actually one of the saddest anime I have ever seen. I have never cried while watching an anime before, but Maiden Abyss genuinely made me cry. And I can't really talk about the scene that made me cry, but if you have a heart, I know that you will cry during this scene too. Anyway, Maiden Abyss is a very complex anime. It's very cutesy, and I think that's why it hurts to see bad things happen to these characters. The whole aspect of going deeper into the abyss has a lot of different metaphors in it, but to take it at face value, the abyss is kind of like traveling through different atmospheres in the ocean. The deeper you go, the more pressure will be applied to these characters, but in the context of the show, the pressure is kind of like physical ailments like vomiting and bleeding and stuff, and it's very intense to see children go through that. And I've just realized that I've moved on to the next anime, which is a very stark contrast to Maiden Abyss. This anime is called SSSS Grid Man, and I've recommended it before in another video. It may surprise you that I didn't recommend certain anime in this video that I've recommended often before, and this seems to be the only repeat I've included. Anyway, SSSS Grid Man is a show all about giant robots fighting each other. It has a ton of references to different tokusatsu series. If I've said that correctly, what I'm referring to is live action series like Ultraman, which this series is a spin-off of, as well as stuff like Power Rangers. There's references to the Megazords. There's references to mecha anime such as Gundam. There's a ton of Evangelion references. This show may be lighthearted, but it did give me a lot of Evangelion feelings to it. It's animated by Trigger, so this is the second Trigger anime to be recommended on this list. I recommend that you go watch this anime. And now for the final anime on this list. this is my favorite series from 2019, Dororo. You may notice that I am drawing the character Dororo, but the way I am drawing them is very weird, and that's because I'm not drawing the anime version of Dororo. I am drawing the original 70s manga version, which looked a lot like Astro Boy. It surprised me the difference between the original manga and the 2019 adaptation. This show is a very interesting and cool samurai tale about a swordsman who is missing essential parts of his body. He goes around killing demons and reclaiming these different body parts, such as lost limbs or his eyes. It's pretty intense and crazy. And it actually has a lot of historical aspects of Japan in it. While it is fiction, it did feel genuinely inspired by actual events. Anyway, this is another show that I would highly suggest you watch, and I think I don't have anything else to say about the show in particular. I will say that it wasn't at all hard for me to choose a show to recommend for 2019. The reason behind that is, as it turns out, I have only watched one new anime in 2019, and if you're a real genius, you can figure out that that anime was Dororo. If you're wondering why I only watched one new anime this year, it's because I was getting caught up on a bunch of older stuff. Not to mention, I did that month where I talked about anime to watch after Evangelion, which means I watched a ton of different older anime. Anyway, this video is coming to an end, so I wanted to say if you liked it, please give it a like. If you want to see more, then subscribe. Thanks for watching, have a good rest, and I will see you in my next one.